Hey everyone, and welcome to our transitioning to using a Clique track class. My name is Will Doggett. I'm the Director of Training and Development here at MultiTracks.com. So glad you excited. I'm so excited and glad that you decided to join us. This is going to be a really, really fun class. We're starting kind of a new series of webinars here. Last week we talked about how to lead effective worship rehearsals, which was a lot of fun. Had a lot of people join us. Talked about a lot of stuff, which was great. So today what we're going to be talking about is how to transition to using a Clique track. Now, before we really get into the material, what I want to do is actually ask you guys a question. So throughout the webinar, we're going to be posting questions and would love to hear from you. And the way we're going to do this is we have it set up so that if you go to multitracks.com/question, you'll see a question pop up there that you can respond to live in the moment and get your results. So what we'll be able to do is over that shoulder, there we go, I got it right that time. You'll see the results start to pop in here. So our questions will go live. There's a bit of a delay between the stream, but would love to have you head to multitracks.com/question to answer. We'll start there with how often do you use a Clique track. A couple things, if you're watching this live, again, thanks for joining us. Would love to have you hit share and share this with your friends, which would be great. The other thing, if you're watching after the moment, obviously you can't head to multitracks.com/question to answer those questions, but you can at least see what everyone did. You can leave a comment in the comments and let us know. A few housekeeping things while we continue to watch the results come in. At the very end, we will be taking questions. So if you have questions, you can post those in the comments. And if you have some, we'll answer those at the very, very end of the webinar. Also, you have a chance to win a free Playback Premium for Life subscription. We'll do that at the very end by sending out a link to a survey. So it looks like here we're tied between we use a Clique every week and we use Clique and tracks every week, which is great, 40%. And then about the other 20% of you never use a Clique track. So as the other 80% of the class can attest, transitioning to a Clique track can be a bit of a difficult thing. So it's also a very impactful thing, and it's going to make a huge difference in your band and how you guys, run tracks and just get better as a band. So let's get into it, and let's get into the material. So this is what we're going to be talking about in this class. One, we're going to answer the question, what is a Clique? We'll talk about why to use a Clique. Talk about how to equip your team for the idea of using a Clique. And then we'll talk about the never-ending, unending quest to find the perfect Clique sound, and we'll talk about if we believe we can do that. And then the very last thing is we'll practically talk about how to get started with this. So let's start at the top here, though, and talk about what is a Clique track. Now, probably about 2 or 3 years ago, I was at a conference. I taught a class similar to this and was back at the booth, and this sweet older lady came up and with her husband, and she said, now I was in the class, I really enjoyed it, but what are you talking about when you mean a Clique track? And so I go on and I talk for a couple minutes, and at the very end she goes, oh, you mean a metronome? And it reminded me of that moment. Yes, metronome, Clique track. If you took piano lessons as a kid, you might remember seeing this sitting on the piano, and the piano teacher, hits it, it starts going back and forth, the metronome to keep everything in time. So that's a metronome. Clique track is maybe a bit of the slang term for this. But what does a Clique track do? Well, first, let me play a Clique track just so you can hear that. That's what it sounds like, right? Not very impressive, but it's going to serve the purpose of keeping everyone in sync. Clique does not lie, right? It is the thing that is true. I had a friend that used to say, Clique don't lie, which I love that phrase. But a metronome keeps everything in sync. Now, why the resistance to a Clique track? So a Clique track keeps everyone in sync, sounds like a good thing. Why in the world do we have to have a whole webinar about this? The truth is, and I want to let you know, if you haven't made that transition, it looked like earlier we had about 20% of you that are not currently playing to a Clique. If you haven't made that transition yet, you are going to get pushed back to Clique. Why the resistance? You're going to hear things like, well, real musicians don't use Clique. I remember years and years ago, the very first church I worked at, we had a drummer come in. He auditioned, and we said, all right, go ahead and click off My Glorious, if that tells you how long ago this was. And so he goes to count off My Glorious. He's clicking his sticks together. He counts it off. It's way too fast. the worship leader is kind of giving them the, hey, pump the brakes, slow down a little bit. And afterwards, we just sent him a quick note and said, hey, loved having you as a part of auditions, but we need you to practice playing to a click. And his response back was basically his 95 thesis on why real musicians don't use click. And in it, he quoted musicians like BWAC and people as examples that don't use click, in which we knew, okay, this guy may not be that great of a fit. It's too restrictive. How many times have you heard drummers or other musicians say, man, when we just kill the click, we can be so spontaneous, right? We can have these really cool musical moments. I want to do spontaneous moments like Bethel, and I can't have a click if I do that, right? This is where I think it really comes from. It all stems from this idea of insecurity. A quick quote I want to share with you before we head on. I just finished this book the other day. The book is called Draft Number 4 by John McPhee. And the quote is this. He's talking about writers here and authors. He says, writers come in two principal categories, those who are overtly insecure and those are covertly insecure. I think the same thing rings true for musicians. So let's just replace the word musicians here. Great quote from John. But musicians come in two principal categories, those who are overtly insecure and those who are covertly insecure. Transitioning to a click is something that is going to bring out the insecurities and the worst in people. You're going to hear them fight and push back against the idea. I think it really stems from, if you've been in that situation, maybe you remember, there's nothing worse than being the one person on your entire team that can't do it, right? Nothing worse than trying to improv on a song and realize you're the one person that can't solo right on the spot. So you have to think about that when you go to transition your team. Realize there's going to be a lot of responses from people based out of insecurity. There's going to be a lot of responses from people that say, we shouldn't do this because they really feel the insecurity of not being able to play with a click. So they really push back. So what we're going to do later in the webinar, when we talk about how to make that transition really practically, I'll share some tips on how to do that. But one note I want to make before we move on, when you do this, I think this is really a good opportunity to be a pastor to your team. You're probably the worship leader, maybe the music director, but this is your opportunity to truly be the worship pastor for your team and to your team. Take the drummer out to coffee, talk with her and talk about, why are you resisting this? Why are you pushing back? Let's see if we can work through it. There's some steps we can do, but this is a great opportunity to really talk to your team, push them along, and challenge them to the idea of using a click. So why should we use a click? That's the next thing I want to talk about. Why should we use a click? Before we do that, though, again, interactive portion of this. If you're watching live, I'd love to have you join along and be a part of this. If you head to multitracks.com/question, that's the way you're going to be able to answer this. Don't answer in the comments, but head to multitracks.com/question. What I want to know is, what do you feel like the biggest benefits of using a click track are? So again, we'll leave that question up here for a bit and see what you guys are saying and what the results are. Again, if you are watching after the fact, you're not watching live, just leave a note in the comments. But if you are watching live, head to multitracks.com/question where you can cast your vote. So looking at some of the benefits, like being able to have more freedom, have better transitions when you're playing with click, the ability to use tracks. We don't often talk about that, but playing with click gives us the ability to use tracks. Gives us the ability to sync to delay pedals, arpeggiators, sync to production elements. So let's take a just pause for just a second here, and let's see some of those results come in, and then we'll come back and see what you guys are saying. All right, interesting. So looks like we're about 40% of you say one of the biggest benefits of using a click is more freedom. 50% now, it's growing. A lot of you say we're tied between better transitions, the ability to use tracks, singing the production elements. I guess all our guitar players and synth players are asleep, which would make sense because it is 2 p.m. in the afternoon. So they are still asleep because they have no jobs because they're guitar players and keyboard players. I'm kidding, keyboard players and guitar players. Better transitions is growing. So yeah, the cool thing about this, there are lots and lots of benefits and reasons to using a click track. We'll talk about a few of those here in a moment, but before I get to what I feel like are the benefits, I thought it'd be kind of cool to talk to some friends of ours. So I asked two friends of mine that we work a lot with here at MultiTracks.com their thoughts on this. So very first is Peter James. Pete plays keys for Hillsong's, a part of Hillsong Church, plays for Hillsong Worship. If you've ever heard the song Oceans, which if you're watching this, you kind of have to. That's like, passing the third grade equivalency test. In order to be a worship leader, you have to know Oceans. Pete played piano on that. Great tones. He's also a patch producer on our site. Which, random side note, go to MultiTracks.com/patches to pick up all of Pete's patches, as well as some other things we'll talk about here later in the webinar. But Pete is a keyboard player. Just so you know the perspective he's coming from, he is a piano keyboard player, and this is what he had to say about playing with Clique. So he said, I love playing to a click because it helps to lock everyone to the song tempo and tracks, and allows me to sync tempo-specific rhythmic patches to songs that would be impossible to do without a click. So a lot of times we think of click from the perspective of the drummer, right? And we think, okay, the click is really going to help our drummer. Our drummer is the one that's struggling to keep in time. We really need to use a click for the sake of our drummer. But for modern keyboard players that play arpeggiators and do really rhythmic things, playing to a click is a huge benefit. You can take it from me, or you can trust our good friend Pete and what he had to say. So I think that's a great point. Again, click is really beneficial, not just to the drummer, but to the entire team. And I include vocalists in that as well too. And we'll talk about how it benefits them in just a moment. Next friend that I asked was David Whitworth. David is the drummer for Bethel. He looks like, yeah, I just played a really good drum fill right there, and that's why I'm doing this face. But he's really doing it because he knows he is the best snare tone, and we can all admit that, right? Great snare tone from David. But here's what David said, and thought this was great. He said, the metronome is a powerful tool providing a solid foundation to our worship sets. Now, I want to pause for just a second before I read the rest of this. You kind of heard me earlier mention that resistance to the idea of we can't have click and have freedom and be spontaneous. And a lot of times people look at Bethel and say, I want to be able to have kind of the spontaneous moments that they have. So we can't use click. But let's go back to what David said. And let's learn from the guy who was doing this week in, week out. He says, brings the band into unity and inspires creativity during spontaneous moments. Some might say, but it kills all my creativity. I believe it to be quite the opposite. I believe it provides a structure for you to build on and create. And I think what David said there is really true. As you start to use a click, you're going to see the benefits that it has, the way that it improves your band, the structure that it gives, the foundation. It's really all about the foundation. Like I said earlier, click don't lie. It's the one true thing. It's really beneficial. So let's talk about a few benefits here. Starting at the very beginning, we mentioned this already, but the idea of freedom, right? We're giving ourselves, the band, freedom, but especially drummers. Now, drummers, I want to apologize on behalf of all worship leaders, all music directors, because we give you an impossible job, right? We say, okay, go ahead and start this song. It's at 72 BPM. Now, as soon as we get to the end, I want you to trash can cymbals and then count us off at 120 BPM. And surely you're going to count the song off, and we're going to suddenly tell you to slow down or speed up, and then talk to you later about how you need to rehearse and practice more. But using a click, especially as a drummer, is going to give you so much freedom. It's going to take the stress off of knowing how to go from 72 BPM to 120 BPM in an instant. So I think it's an incredibly beneficial thing. The other thing it's really going to help is it's going to allow you to have better transitions. How many times have you been in a song like Oceans, you get to the very end, you hit a nice pad, and you're holding it out, and you want to go into the next song, into What a Beautiful Name, and then suddenly you just hear, and the vocalist starts, right, and the drummer's keeping time on the hi-hat, and it just kind of ruins the moment. Now, if we're playing with in-ears and we're playing with click, it's going to give us the ability to have better transitions, smoother transitions, and not have to always have the drummer count us off from one song to the next. So again, giving the drummer the freedom to just kind of relax between the song, and having that click keeps us all in time and is going to give us better transitions. The other benefit, and this maybe sounds a little obvious, but maybe one you haven't thought about before, is playing to a click allows us to play with tracks. So we're going to have a class here in probably a few weeks, I believe, where we just talk about the 5 things you need to use MultiTracks, the 5 things you need to transition to using tracks. And one of those is the ability to play to a click track. So using a click is the thing that's going to keep us all in sync and allow us to use tracks. It's going to allow us to use really rhythmic elements of a track. It's going to allow us to use really ambient elements of a track, but keep everything locked in and in time, which is great. Again, we mentioned this earlier, but for us guitar players, I'm one of those included, it allows you to sync to delay pedals. So as guitar players, we have delay pedals like this guy. This one's mine, the Time Factor. And we can plug in a MIDI cable into that, send tempo information from Ableton Live, and sync our delays up perfectly to the click. Now, there's nothing worse as a guitar player than starting a song at 72 BPM and we're just tapping our foot the whole time, right? Tapping our right foot the whole time because we're just fluctuating and we're changing the tempo. And we're changing the tempo as we're playing because we're live in the moment and real musicians are playing. But if we use a click, that's going to allow us to not have to tap our tempo. It's going to either give us the constant tempo that we can tap once and everyone keeps at 72 BPM and we're good, or we can even go so far as taking a MIDI out from Ableton Live and syncing our click up to that, which is great. Now for keyboard players, same concept, like what Pete said earlier, it gives us the ability to sync to arpeggiators to rhythmic content. So we plug a MIDI cable into our Moog or into whatever keyboard we have, and we can sync up our arpeggiators, our delays, our tremolos for our Rhodes sounds. It's going to make it really easy. The other thing it allows us to do is sync to production elements. So if you've checked out our course that we have on our training page, MultiTracks.com/training, where we talk about syncing to lights, lyrics, and video. You've seen in the videos I've done talking about syncing Ableton Live to Pro Presenter. You know what I'm talking about. But this idea of playing to a click and having this light cue happen at exactly the right moment. I just got an email yesterday from someone from South Africa that was saying, hey, what's the gear I need to do this? How do we do this? How to sync lyrics to Pro Presenter and have them perfectly in cue. The only way we can do that is if we are playing to a click and keeping everything in time. So here's what I want to do now. I want to take a quick break, commercial break just for a moment and show you a quick video, and then we'll come back and talk through that. So check this guy out.
What's up? Good, how are you? Good morning. Put real left first. Okay. Let's go from the intro straight into the interlude. You great? Awesome. Y'all ready? Let's do it.
Rehearse and perform with Playback. Download the free version today.
Awesome. So that was a quick video about Playback, and I want to just take a moment here real quick and talk about Playback. Like we mentioned in the video, it is a free app that you can download, available for iPad or iPhone, available on the App Store today. So if you're watching this, you want more information about Playback, you could do two things. Go to the App Store, search for Playback, or you could go to MultiTracks.com/Playback, and you'll see the feature page where we talk about all the features of Playback, everything that is available to you, and then what you can get if you use either Pro or Premium, which are optional subscriptions that unlock some extra features. So what I was going to do is just show you some of my favorite features of Playback real quick before we go on. And we didn't mention this, we didn't talk about this before the webinar, but you're actually going to get a sneak peek at a new version of Playback that will be available here shortly. And ironically enough, it's all about Clique track. So I'll come back to that in just a second, but let me take you through a few things in Playback. So one of the greatest features is the ability when you log into Playback, anything, and of course, it logs me right out. So let me log back in here real quick. We are feverishly testing, if that's a word, the new version of our app. And so I think I got logged out because of that, but we're excited to show this to you. So anything, any track I purchase, shows up automatically in the app as soon as I log into it, which is great. So I can go into my purchase library, any MultiTracks I've purchased, any custom mixes I've purchased are available there. We also have Playback Rentals, which is the most affordable and easiest way to get started using tracks. You can search the catalog for any artist. So let's look for Hillsong here. And when I search, it's going to show me every song from Hillsong, different artists. One of my favorite things, I can actually go in, see if this works. And I can preview the song before I rent it, which is great. So it gives me the option to try out different arrangements. Now, a few things I'll show you really quickly. One, I can go into a song and hit edit. And if I have Pro or Premium, I can rearrange this song really quickly. It's as simple as pressing plus. Let's say it's a brand new song, I'm going to teach the chorus up front. I'll add the chorus there, and you're going to hear a guide cue with that. So as soon as I press play.
1, 2, chorus, 2, 3, 4.
Right, so you hear that chorus, the guide cue that says chorus up front. Again, I can take that out by hitting reset default arrangement. I don't want to show you too much more because we'll talk about this a bit in our webinar next week. But one of the cool new features that we have coming here very, very shortly in the next few weeks is brand new built-in click options. And so we'll talk through some of those here in a moment, but one of those is the ability to add, let's just show you this, those of you that have used Playback for a while will appreciate this. The option to go in and add a click track and name it. Choose any tempo, any time signature, hit add, which is great, and then press play. I can open up and adjust the subdivisions of that click. One of my favorite things, though, is Playback is going to automatically adjust the subdivision level by default based on the tempo of the song. So you see I added one at 120 here. So it just gave me quarter notes and accent. But let's add something here a little slower. So let's go to 77. And this is a really ingenious name here, song. And we'll add that. And now you see for those subdivisions, it brought eighth notes up for me automatically, which is great. So I can add brand new click stuff, I can subdivide, I can collapse and expand my click. And then my favorite thing, another one of my favorite things is I can actually go into settings and choose different click sounds. And this is going to give me the same click sound across all my sets. So cowbell, for all of you Will Ferrell fans out there, because all you need is more cowbell, or classic, which is my personal favorite. So that's a look at some of the cool new features that you get in Playback. And again, I would encourage you, if you're interested in trying out the Clique build before it releases on the App Store, do one thing for me. Head to multitracks.com/support. What we'd love to do is have you just write us an email and say, hey, I'd love to help beta test this. What we'll do is we'll put you on a list of potential people that could help us test this and give us feedback on the feature. And again, this should be available here shortly in a few weeks, which we're really excited to have that out. We also have a lot of great features planned for the rest of the year, so it's going to be a very exciting year for Playback. Now, if you want more information on Playback or to start a free 30-day trial of Pro or Premium, head to multitracks.com/playback. And there you'll see all the features of Playback. You'll learn more about Playback, and you'll be able to start a 30-day free trial of Playback from there. So let's move on. Now, let's talk about equipping your team. We've talked about answer the question, what is a click track? We've talked about why to use a click track. Now, let's talk about equipping your team. A few quick tips I just want to share here about how to equip your team to do this. So one very practical thing is just on songs on Planning Center, add the tempo to Planning Center. Now, if you want a few more tips and a few more information on how to better prepare your team for rehearsal, check out our webinar that we did last week. It's available on YouTube. It'll be available on our training page here shortly, where we talk about how to prepare your team using Rehearsal Mix, using Planning Center, and just some really quick, easy ways to do that. So very first one to me is just adding a tempo to all your songs in Planning Center, so your guitar players, so your keyboard players know exactly what tempo you are using. Now, it would be really great, though, if your drummer could actually play along with the exact track you're doing, maybe just minus the drum parts, practice playing along to the bass pattern. Well, with Rehearsal Mix, you can do that. So Rehearsal Mix gives you access to every single song in our catalog, access to an original track, and individual mixes for rehearsal, which is great. And there's a 30-day free trial for that. So you can head to multitracks.com/rehearsal mix if you're interested in checking that out. But again, Rehearsal Mix is a great way to equip your team to play with a click. Gives your drummer an opportunity, or your keyboard player, anyone in your band, an opportunity to play along with the tracks before they actually show up. Now, the other thing you could do is give your drummer, keyboard player, access to Playback. You could either purchase Pro or Premium for them, or they can just log on to the App Store. Again, available for iPad, iPhone, free. Download the app Playback and just use it completely free and use the clicks that are included with Playback. And again, here in a few weeks, they'll have a brand new built-in click experience that makes it really the best, most rock-solid way to use a click in a worship setting, and just super, super easy to do, and all that for free, which is great. Now, if you use Ableton Live, there's something called Foundations for Live. That is a great way to use a click in live. So I built this, probably 8 years ago now, and I really built this for the purpose of our church, because we were multiple campuses, multiple drummers. I struggled to find a click sound that made everyone happy. So I created Foundations for Live, which gave us a subdividable click within Ableton Live, gave us the ability to say stop the click at this point in the song, to choose different click sounds, different guide sounds, all within Ableton Live, which is great. So Foundations for Live, you can find that by searching the site, or you can go to multitracks.com/patches. And used to be on our store, but it's now part of our patches channel, so you can find that there, as well as other patches from guys like Pete, myself, multitracks.com patches, lots of cool stuff. The other thing, if you're in a situation, maybe you're using a DAW other than Ableton Live, or you want to build your own guide tracks that you can upload to cloud to use in Playback, and you're looking for guide cues and clicks that you can use to build your own content, you can check out multitracks.com/free. You can go to the page. That's going to give you free click tracks, free guide cues in English, French, Spanish, and Portuguese that you can download and use completely for free, which is great. So go to the page, download those. We have a video that will show you how to access those, how to use those in whatever DAW you're using. I think when I did the video, I showed how to use them in live, but same basic concept. So that is a great resource, multitracks.com/free. So before we wrap up here, two more things. Let's talk about finding the perfect click sound. We'll answer the question, can we ever solve the constant journey and quest to find the perfect click sound? Before we do that, though, again, I want to ask you guys one more question. This is our final question. How do you run Clique for your team? Earlier we saw about 80% of you use Clique regularly or use Clique with tracks. I'd love to know how you are running Clique. Again, the way to answer this, if you're watching live, multitracks.com/question. So let's take a look and let's see as those results come in. We'll pause here for a second and see what you guys are saying. Again, if you're watching this after the fact and not live, you can just leave a comment in the box. If you're watching live, head to multitracks.com/question to answer. And let's just wait a second here for everyone to catch up and let's see what you guys say. All right, great. So looks like the majority of you are running Clique from Ableton. Again, check out Foundations for Live, great way to use Clique in Ableton. 20% of you are running Clique from Playback, and 20% of you are running Clique from an external metronome. Quick story before we move on. The idea of using an external metronome, I always joke, the phrase "click, don't lie," which is true. It's kind of the solid, it's the main foundational thing. I did learn a lesson back years and years ago when I was at Liberty University playing in the band there, that click does not lie unless, of course, you use a Boss Doctor beat and you forget to change the 9-volt battery, in which case 85 suddenly becomes 84.9%, 84.7, 84.5, and you're yelling at your drummer going, why can't you play in time? What's going on? You realize just the battery's dying. So yes, click does not lie unless the battery dies in your click track. So let's talk about this journey though, this quest to find the perfect click sound. Can it be found? Can we ever find it? Well, I think truthfully the answer is no. We cannot find a perfect click sound, but what you can do is find a sound that works for your team. There's a few tips and pointers I want to give you before we really get in, before we wrap this up, that I think is going to help you find a sound or make a sound that works for you. So a few things that I think is really going to help. One, use the same sound across all your songs. 2, use a subdivided click. And then 3, use an accented click. So again, let me show you in Playback what this looks like. But the idea of using the same sound across all songs is really important so it's a consistent experience for everyone. So in Playback, and again, this will be available here in a few weeks. If you're watching after we recorded, hopefully it's already available. You can head to multitracks.com/playback to learn if it is or not. But I can tap the settings button here, go into settings, and again, we'll have the option to choose a click sound. I think we have 11 different click sounds you can choose from. And when you choose a click sound, it's going to go across all the songs in your set. For me, that's one of the really foundational things about using a click is making sure as your band plays, it's a very constant kind of experience. They're not going in and out of a percussive click for one song and a classic kind of sound for the next song, but keep it consistent from song to song so that it just feels like one experience, right? The next one is the idea of using a subdivided click. Now, what I mean by that, and where this is really going to help is if you look at my set here, looks like I have songs that are almost all, no, that one's a little different. So we've got a song at 86, one at 68, one at 83, and then I just have a click track here that's at 120. Now, if I'm playing this song at 120, I'm probably only going to want just quarter notes here. So if I listen to that, right, that's just quarter notes. But as I go to a slower song, you can see we automatically, again, bring up eighth notes for you.
2,
And that's going to help just keep me in time. The basic idea here is as we slow down the song, the time between when we hear the clicks actually make sound. So beat 1, beat 2 gets a little longer, right? So if we add accents and subdivisions in, then what we start to do is fill those gaps with an extra note. So if we're doing a song at 50 BPM, then we've got this really wide gap, and it makes it really difficult for your band to stay perfectly in sync. At a faster song where it's kind of like this, it's easier. When it's spread out a little bit, it's a little more difficult. So using a subdivided click where we can bring up 8th notes, 16th notes as needed is really going to help. And again, so this song, 68, both of these guys, or this one's at 68, so I've got 8th notes in there. I can adjust the levels of that. I think that's really important. You don't want to say every single song in my set has quarter notes and 8th notes at a set level, because if you do a song that's really fast, suddenly you got 8th notes just cranking, and that's going to be potentially distracting to people, or maybe even make them think, oh, okay, this measure is actually twice as long because I hear 2 clicks at the same time. And the ability to adjust the levels of those clicks is really, really important so that your ear can distinguish between
2,
a quarter note and an 8th note, right? So, and the last thing here is the idea of using an accented click. Now, this is one that I'm personally really passionate about, and I think if you're playing tracks, it's even way more important than if you're not using tracks. But using an accented click, and by accented click, let me change back to classic here so we can hear it a little easier. It's just the idea that it's going to let me know where the downbeat of 1 is. So if I go to this click here, you hear the up, 2, 3, 4, up, right? That's our accent there. Our accent is just signifying for us where the downbeat is, where beat 1 is in our measure. Now, if we're just playing a song at 120 BPM like this is the click I have loaded in, this may not seem incredibly beneficial, but as we get into songs that especially have time signature changes, everyone, 2/4 is the new 4/4, so you go from a chorus to a bridge or a chorus, pre-chorus into a chorus, everyone sneaks a 2/4 measuring there. That can really throw your band off, especially if you have 2/4 in the section before the first chorus and 4/4 in the second chorus. But having that accent is really going to help your team know, okay, this is the downbeat, this is the next downbeat. And again, the ability to adjust the level of that accent is really, really big. So again, 3 just quick pointers as we're talking about. Again, I don't know that we'll find the perfect click sound, but 3 things that are going to help us use the same sound across all our songs, use a subdivided click, and then use an accented click, a click that gives us the ability to have the accent. So before we wrap up here, I want to give you some really practical steps. How do we get started? How do we make this happen? And again, I think this is really the most important part. I mean, after all, we called the class transitioning to using a click track. So we talk about what a click track is, why you should use it, some of the benefits of it. But how do you take this and practically give this to your team? So if you're at home taking notes, this would be a section I would really suggest taking notes on, because I think it's going to help you really practically apply it to your team. The very, very first thing we need to do is we need to cast vision to our team and answer the question, why? So for me, for example, I have the question, why would anyone put a giant sign in the middle of nowhere that says why with a question mark on it? But thankfully, someone somewhere took a picture of it on Unsplash, and I'm now able to use it in my presentation. But answering the question why, I think it's important, cast vision. Make sure everyone knows why you're doing it. Don't just, what is today, Wednesday, when we're recording this live, don't just go back to everyone on your team and say, hey guys, tomorrow's rehearsal, as we learned in our rehearsals class last week, tomorrow's rehearsal, we're going to start playing a click track right away, and we're doing this, making it happen. Every single song, go, right? If you do that, it's not going to work well. You're going to have to find a completely new team to play with you next week, because they're not going to be there. But as you cast vision to your team, review the benefits that we mentioned earlier. Take them through that. The freedom that you have. Drummers don't have to count off every single section. It's going to give you better transition. It's going to let you use tracks, give you the ability to sync to your delays for your guitar pedal, sync your arpeggiators and your synthesizers and rhythmic stuff to Clique, and allow you to sync to production elements. The other thing here is the idea of giving it time. So set deadlines. Again, don't just say, hey, tomorrow we're going to start playing to Clique. We're doing every single song with Clique, and we are going, and we're off to the races. Give it time. Set deadlines. There was a conference that we were at a few years ago, and every year I'd see kind of the same guy. And he would come back, and after the class that we teach, kind of the basic class, he'd come back and go, hey, I'm really excited. Next year I'd see him again, and he'd say, I'm really excited. We just started playing with in-ears, right? I'd say, that's awesome, man. He goes, yeah, this next year, this is the year we use Clique. So year would pass, see him the next year. Suddenly his team is now using Clique. Another year would pass. Guess what he's doing? Now they're using MultiTracks. So it took him 3 years to make that transition, but his team is now using Clique and Ears Tracks and using it consistently. So again, don't feel like this is something that needs to be done right away. Let your team know, hey guys, in a month we're going to do one song with Clique. Pick the opening song. No one cares about the opening song anyway. Or pick the closing song. Definitely no one cares about the closing song. They're ready to go to the buffet and watch football on Sunday. They don't care that you're closing with Good Good Father. So pick the closing song. Play it with a click track. If people mess up, if they struggle, if they stumble, it's okay. Because the beautiful thing about that is no one in the congregation can hear it. So pick a song that is just kind of a, I don't want to say a throwaway song, but something really, really simple. And then expand it from there. Say, okay, next week we're going to do it on the closing song and the opening song. And then we're going to do it opening, closing, and the next week we're going to do it on our second song in the set. And slowly work your way up to using a click on every single song in the set, kind of as necessary, as needed. But again, really important here, give it time, set deadlines, don't do this right away with everything. The last thing here is the idea of equipping your team, training your team. Get your drummers on rehearsal mix, set them up with a rehearsal mix subscription so they get access to every single song in the catalog. They can literally rehearse with the exact arrangement, exact parts. Get them Playback. They can use Playback for free, use the built-in Clique stuff that will be available here shortly, and use that to practice playing to a click. Another thing you can do is get your drummers drum lessons. So the last church I was at, we would, for drummers that were struggling with Clique, or just as kind of a general, hey, we appreciate you, we would set up drum lessons for them. And you might hear that and go, we have no budget. How in the world are we ever going to be able to do drum lessons? We'll barter with, the drummer from the big church down the street, or say, hey man, if you can come do drum lessons, we'll do whatever. However you can help them out, and you guys can trade we'll do this, you do that for us. Some people you might be able to talk to them and say, hey, we really don't have a budget, but we'd love for someone to be able to equip our drummers, train our drummers. Maybe you can get someone to come over, teach your drummers on Saturday for kind of a seminar thing. But make sure to equip your team and equip them each individually the way they need to be equipped. So if your keyboard player is really struggling with the click, spend a little more time with them than maybe you need to with your drummer. But equip each person individually. This is really, again, a chance to mentor, to train, to pastor your team. And that's going to take them through all of this. So again, to recap, cast vision to your team. Make sure you let them know why you're doing this. Let them know the benefits of using clicks and making that happen for their team. Your team, give it time, set deadlines, take time to make it happen. Equip and train your team. And again, make sure you give them the resources they need in order to use Clique. So with that, we're done, right? Not a very long class. Really, really practical though. Take these things away, take them back to your team. Talk about why you should do this, why you should use them. Incredibly, incredibly beneficial. Now, if you are watching this live, a few notes I want to give you before we wrap up, including letting you know how you can be entered to win a Playback Premium for Life subscription. So we'll get to that in just a second. If you're watching the replay, thanks so much for watching. And you can probably see the rest of our webinars archived there as well too. So very first thing up front, if you want more information about Playback, if you want to learn the different features Playback has, make sure to head to multitracks.com/playback. Again, there you can sign up for a free 30-day free trial for Pro, for Premium. You can edit arrangements. Again, you'll be able to plug an audio interface in, have to do no routing whatsoever. Everything's already pre-routed for you, which is great, and save to that audio interface. A lot of really, really cool features. We have a video there for every single feature of the app. So if you are worried about how do I get started, this is way too difficult, we have a video for every single feature in the app that's going to take you through all of it. And if you watch every video, it's less than an hour. So in less than an hour, you'll know everything you need to know about the app, which is great. The other thing, if there's something in this webinar, something I said, or you feel like you had a question that I didn't fully answer, then head to multitracks.com/support. We have a great support team that would love to hear from you. We'd love to walk you through how to get this set up, the equipment you need to make this happen. If you have a question with any of our products, you download Playback and suddenly one Sunday it crashes. We don't want that to happen, but if it does happen, go to multitracks.com/support and let us know. We would love to help you. Again, lastly, two final things before we sign off here. I'm going to be posting a link to the survey in the comments to this video, whether you're watching on Facebook, YouTube, or Twitter, in order to be entered to win a free Playback Premium subscription for life, all you have to do is fill out that survey. We're not going to add you to our subscriptions for our mailing list. We're going to keep your email and your name private, but we'd just love to hear from you, ask you a few questions, and that's going to automatically enter you in to win a Playback Premium subscription for life. And then finally, we have a webinar next week that we'd love to have you be a part of. We're going to be talking a little more about playback and talking about how to have freedom while running tracks. So we'll talk about both before service and after service, how playback can help you with this concept and idea of having freedom while running tracks. You heard David earlier talk about spontaneity and the ability to kind of go whenever, wherever. We'll talk about how to do all that in playback, both before service and after service. One quick programming note, again, if you're watching this live, we'll have this webinar next week, but instead of having it on our normal day of Wednesday, it's going to be Tuesday, same time though, 2 p.m. Central. Would love to have you there. Same place to watch it, YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, all that fun stuff. So guys, thanks so much again for joining us. If you have any more questions, again, head to MultiTracks.com/support. Would love to see you next week for our webinar where we talk about having freedom with running tracks with playback. But until then, take care, and we will see you guys soon. See you guys. Bye.